James Petercsak. I'm so glad to talk to you about this amazing, wonderful topic of cutting edge health optimization medicine, I guess you could call it. It's departing from the sick care model of traditional medical environment and going for optimal. So I'm so happy to get involved with you through the awesome operation called Marek Health. And I think it'd be great if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the operation and what you do, and then we'll get into some details of how listeners might engage in further investigation and fine-tuning, refining, optimizing.
Thanks so much for having me on, Brad. I really appreciate it. And so, yeah, my name is James Petercsak. I am a patient care coordinator at Merrick, and what that means is I just help people kind of coordinate, coming on board as a patient, explaining a little bit about, what we do, and then helping interpret, some of the blood work that, we do, and kind of look deep into the health and wellness of each patient that comes on board. And we very much take an individual approach. A lot of people come to us for a number of different reasons. And so we are very, kind of grateful for, each patient. We look at each patient as an individual, not as some sort of cookie cutter like, protocol. And so, yeah, that's kind of our specialty. And people come to us for a variety of reasons. And so we're able to kind of really tailor our treatment plans and our protocols to each person.
So for those unfamiliar with the whole cutting edge scene here, we're familiar with going to the doctor for your annual checkup and they send you to the blood lab and you get your report. And now you can kind of bypass this formality and go online and engage with an operation like Marek Health to participate through going and getting blood tests and then getting the results evaluated by experts who are looking for optimization rather than disease or absence of disease risk factors, which is pretty much what you could say about your annual checkup and your mainstream engagement with blood testing, which is fine. And I go and get my checkup. I just had one recently and everything looked normal and I was sent off. But of course, as listeners have heard me talk about a lot, I want to know what's optimal rather than just normal, especially when today's norm is so pathetic. So we talk about testosterone levels, for example, as a good signal of male vitality, especially, and the range being the normal quote unquote range being from something like 200 to 1,000. That's a huge range, right? That's someone quadruple the testosterone is going to be in a lot different state than someone who just barely tiptoed into that normal range. But generally speaking, no one's going to care anything about that because you're not outside of that category. So maybe you could take us through like how the experience might work for someone who's interested in going beyond the traditional Western medical protocol.
Yeah, so even what you just said there, there's a lot to unpack. We try to optimize people to the best of our ability, not just get them through to an arbitrary benchmark of fitting them in a reference range. You mentioned testosterone. The reference range, if you look at that, is very wide as it is. If you're looking at both total and free, and so we tend to look very deeply, and we realize the limitations of testing in and of itself. Testosterone can vary quite substantially based on what type of test you're getting from the lab itself. So we'd like to think we're very much up to date on all of those issues that might arise from just testing itself. So there's high sensitivity testing that we generally get in your initial diagnostics just to make sure what we're looking at is very accurate. And then when we do get those test results, we want to kind of look at not just the number but the symptom too. So the symptoms that a patient is having. And so It's rather difficult to just say, this number is falling within this range, and that's fine. That's normal because it's in some sort of range. Well, if a patient's having symptoms, then we might want to look deeper, and that doesn't just kind of fall into testosterone. There's a lot of different markers that you can talk about where that is the case, that phenomenon is the case. So, um, yeah, we like to think that's why we kind of treat each patient as a patient and not just a set of numbers or lab values, if you will.
So I've been for many years discovering this simple ability to go online and order my own blood tests. And I test the male hormones, especially. I'll do some other things. It's very inexpensive compared to your insurance statement that you get in the mail after you've been to the doctor. So,
Good
for
point.
$68, I can test free testosterone total and sex hormone binding globulin. And they know me in the blood lab because I go in there routinely and just stay on top of this stuff because it's so easy. But that's me engaging directly with an online portal where they just take your money and give you official paperwork so you can go get blood drawn at a lab. And I think what's really interesting to me is lately we've seen the emergence of operations like yours where you can facilitate the blood draw like I can do myself. But then when the report comes, tell us how the patient is dealt with and what kind of expert consultation we get.
Yeah, well, we'll send, your, LabCorp report to you, but we also have our own report that we generate. It's our, it's our own, lab report based on, not the reference ranges, but where we tend to like to see people. And again, it's not a cookie cutter. We have our own kind of values, but we have our own kind of ranges where we tend to like to see people based on our experience and based on kind of the cutting edge in the field of endocrinology and just optimization. So yeah, the patient will get their individual lab report based on what they ordered, and we'll also present some recommendations. It could be pharmaceutical. That's something that we'd obviously have to talk to a licensed provider about, but there could also be supplement recommendations, or it could be lifestyle recommendations. So there's a lot of different kind of ways we can tackle something. And a lot of people come to us, maybe they aren't comfortable with pharmaceutical approach. They want to try lifestyle intervention first, and that's we like that. We will coach them into what might be driving up a certain marker or causing a certain symptoms, and we might suggest certain lifestyle changes, or maybe doing sauna, cold plunge, things that you talk a lot about in your podcast. And so that's kind of the exciting thing about Marek Health, is that there's a lot of different options, and it's definitely not a one size fits all kind of thing.
Right. I appreciated that. I had a consultation with you and then another consultation with expert nurse practitioner who, of course, was very athletic minded and athletic herself. And so it seems like the operation has been built around peak performers. Stephen Granzello, the marketing guy who I first met, of course, he's a powerlifting competitor. And so everyone seems to be on this quest for optimization. So when you engage with people like that, it's really refreshing because, like you described, I was presented with a whole bunch of different suggestions. And before I got my testing, I thought I was doing pretty well. But when I have a dozen different ideas to take it further and do things a little better, that's really exciting for me because I'm always trying to level up whatever level I'm at right now. But it seems when we're in back to compare to mainstream approach, someone has a number that's flagged and then they get immediately directed to pharmaceutical intervention, which might be most likely attacking the symptoms and not the cause. So it seems like we have an opportunity to kind of do both, or dance around, like you said, hey, try some lifestyle factors first, and then maybe go to another tier and continue to explore what's possible.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different phases that we like to talk to our patients about first. And it really depends on the person, Brad. How they want to approach things, and so that's why it's really hard in medicine to kind of have a one size fits all kind of approach to anything, really, whether that's optimizing testosterone, heart disease, or at least trying to mitigate that. Just anti-aging protocols in and of themselves, and you're right, we do try to get to the root cause of things, not necessarily just managing symptoms. Um, but that's what makes this field very exciting, in my opinion, is that there's a lot of different ways we can go about treating someone and managing care, and yeah, it's a very refreshing look, I think, at the industry as a whole, because as you alluded to in the beginning, typically kind of managing disease, not necessarily optimizing humans, and that's really what we're interested in. We have clinicals every week about that, and we have a thread internally where we talk about things on a daily basis, about things that might come up and studies that are just out, and the latest and greatest on the research of longevity, optimization, and human performance.
Tell us about the team that's been assembled. Your founder, this character that I enjoy watching on YouTube, Derek. His show is called More Plates, More Dates, and quite a bright guy. He's had a lot of attention and followers from some really thoughtful commentary on training, peak performance, and so forth. But then all the rest of the group, I'd love to know, and the various tiers of support that a patient can engage with.
Yeah, so Derek is a co-founder of Marek Health, and he's very, very well known on YouTube. It's just a wealth of information, and pretty much always interested in the forefront of research, and he's always talking about that on his channel, and really, Marek has just assembled a team of really like-minded individuals that in that way, we're kind of always researching and thinking about, how we can optimize health, and looking at, various protocols, how we can tweak things, and the, the family of providers, we have various doctors, DO, MD, and we have, nurse practitioners on the team, all of which are very performance minded, optimizing performance, optimizing longevity, optimizing, the human being, for lack of a better term. And so we have our own kind of clinical chat where we're bouncing ideas off of each other. We're bouncing, questions off of each other. So a lot of times when patients, they might have a question for me, I have access to this amazing team of just brilliant people, where I can say, hey, what's going on with this or that, and it's an incredible resource that all of the patient care coordinators have access to, and so it's very nice, and it really is a chat that every day we're talking about stuff, and it's so really it's a community of very, very just interesting people obsessed about human performance and longevity.
There's, for a lot of us, this envisioned line in the sand, especially athletes, right? Because we have doping rules in a lot of sports where you're crossing that line when you go and take prescriptions and things like that might be on the ban list. And so on one side, we have lifestyle optimization, getting more sleep, trying some cold plunge, taking a bunch of supplements, and then the decision to partake in prescription medication. And it seems like it's been characterized in this black and white manner, where, especially in the athletic realm, you're either a doper or you're legal. I really appreciated getting deep into the Alberto Salazar case, where he was dancing on this line, where technically a lot of the crazy shit he was doing was not breaking rules, but it was pushing the rules to the extent that, like, there were stats like 75% of the athletes in his running group were on prescription thyroid medication. Oh, you
Mm.
think all these Olympic athletes all have sluggish thyroids, or were they, going to the very edge of what's legal to try to get performance advantage? Now, for 99.99% of us who aren't subject to World Anti-Doping Agency rules and have to obsess about the list of things we can and can't put in our body, it seems like the black and white is kind of turning into this interesting gray area where you can dabble in this or that in a therapeutic manner rather than overhaul your entire system. And now you're on the needle and you're taking, this dose of whatever it is, testosterone, and overriding all the other possible factors. Now there's ways where you can kind of dance around, and maybe you could get into some of those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, well, the majority of patients that are coming to us are not subject to, world, doping, authority and agencies. Um, and, you know, we will have, on occasion, many patients that have maybe in the past, looked for an edge or, might have dabbled in performance enhancing drugs or whatnot. And so really one kind of a vision I should say that Merrick has was founded upon is just giving those people support. Um, there is a little bit of a, of course, you know, a I guess a stigma, if you will, for those athletes, and so many times they don't have a place to turn. And so we welcome them, with open arms, and we're not a facility to, I don't know, we're not going to condone, anything, that is illegal or, outside of what the standard of care is. But there's a lot we can do to kind of mitigate, what those athletes might have kind of put themselves in before, and so we can try to help alleviate maybe a lot of uh, the damaging side effects that could come with those compounds. Um, Most of it is, could be with the heart, um, or just, managing their hormones in general, because as you know, a lot of these, compounds could have very deleterious effects on just, the natural ability to produce and their own endogenous production of hormones. So, um, is that kind of where you were leaning with that question, or anything specific?
Well, that's nice to know that there's a resource for people who've gone to the extreme of peak performance and um, possibly abusing these substances because of doing so irresponsibly. I remember back in the 80s when there was a lot of suspicion of doping in the track and field world. And the investigative journalist discovered that there was a doctor in Southern California who may be associated. They looked this guy up, and he goes, "Oh, sure, I will treat any athlete that wants to, wants to engage in a doping protocol because I want them to do it safely so they don't drop dead." And so this guy was open for business and had numerous, elite level athletes under his care, doctor-patient privilege. So we're not naming names and disgracing people going for the Olympic gold, but it was kind of a refreshing perspective to realize, hey, this stuff's going to happen anyway, and you might as well do it in a safe and sensible manner. And here was a person that I thought that was respectable, that he stood up and said, "I'm here to support these people." Not that he's condoning it either, but yeah, definitely it's nice to have a resource out there rather than going to the parking lot of the gym and the guy opens his trunk and you decide that you want to get bigger too, and you go to that dark side, because that really is a dark side. But I guess I'm also wondering for people like me, when I had my consultation and I had a whole bunch of different suggestions from you and Angelica, and the last three or four were in the prescription drug category. And that's, I made the decision. You guys didn't even, meddle in that. But I said, you know what, this is going to be phase 2 for someday when I want to go to the next level, but I'm going to try all these phase 1 things. And that might be just kind of a dated perspective on my part from being a former athlete and vowing never to get into the anti-doping uh, gray area. It was like, well, I can't do this. I'm racing and I have to stay clean. And so now obviously I don't have those concerns and I'm free to partake in any of the suggestions. But I'm wondering if you see that everything's sort of on a scale whereby you would recommend people maybe try this, maybe try that, maybe go on some outside exogenous prescription hormone supplement and then go back off. I mean, how is it going when people are seeking to optimize with all the tools available?
Um, well, obviously, if they're, there's, if they're, competing in a class when, they have compounds tested, obviously we're not, that's, a whole nother story. But, most, like I said, most are not. And so I think like in your case that you just mentioned, um, you were someone, and made it clear that what, kind of what you were comfortable with, what you weren't. And so I think a lot of people will just kind of be upfront with what they're looking for. Again, we have to kind of tighten the reins as to what is available, what is not, and there definitely is a protocol that we follow to make sure we're going through all the right steps to make sure, again, we're not doing any harm or anything, because these are compounds you have to respect for sure, and you have to use them in a wise manner, get your follow-ups, and so um, it's really just a case of monitoring, getting, you know, how comfortable, a patient is. And a lot of this stuff is, you know, it's getting more mainstream as it is anyway. So it's not necessarily, stuff that's really looked down upon like, 20 years ago or something. It's a lot more mainstream today in terms of, hormones, HRT, um, particularly with older, you know, athletes that have maybe pushed their bodies to the limits as it is. And so yeah, it really is kind of up to the individual.
HRT standing for hormone replacement therapy. So let's talk about that because I think um, the basic mainstream perspective is that you turn on that switch and you go to pharmaceutical, or you try to eat your meat and fruit and get a lot of sleep, and there's no kind of in between ground. And when we talk about going on hormone replacement, I've often heard like it's a lifelong decision because it's really difficult to go back. And I'm not even sure if that's accurate or not. But maybe talk through when these males in the older age groups still want to maintain vitality, strength, power, libido, all the great things that we hear, our genetics, ancestral experiences. We're supposed to live long enough to reproduce, and then nature doesn't care what happens to us. And so we're supposed to have this decline and accept it. But now, of course, we want more out of life, and we want to be as optimal as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah, and so what we can do is kind of replace those hormones exogenously from when they do decline from either andropause or menopause. And as we do age, one in terms of one with males at least, testosterone being a very important hormone in the body. Um, if that does, and levels can decline for various reasons. It could be um, you know genetic, it could be lifestyle factors, it could be things that are kind of out of someone's control, traumatic brain injury, something like that. There's many different causes. Um, but when you do have someone who is truly deficient and you can replace those hormones, it's kind of a life-changing event. Um, it's still something that's there's more than one way to skin the cat. It doesn't necessarily have to go to anything exogenous. And a lot of times we try to optimize everything before we're going into the world of just replacement, because like you said, it's not that it's a lifetime thing, but you probably should go into it thinking that, just as long as you want to realize the benefits, it's something that has to be continuous. Um, and so it's a big decision for specifically a male. For females that might, be going through menopause, perimenopause, pause a little early. It's a major benefit in their quality of life, right? And so and these are bioidentical compounds too. They are something that it's supposed to make you feel younger and more vital if you're truly deficient, right? And so um, otherwise it's like I mentioned, there's just a whole host of different things that we can try. Um, but yeah, it's it's very popular because it works.
So my perspective is a lot of people are deficient because they're sitting around with a spare tire, ordering pizzas, eating Ben and Jerry's, not getting enough sleep, having the Wi-Fi and the mobile device in their pocket near their reproductive organs, and all these lifestyle related variables that they're not excelling at. And I've also read research that if you are sort of in a adverse hormonal state, inflammatory state, as evidenced by the spare tire, the accumulation of visceral fat, that even if you take exogenous hormones, they have the potential to not be very effective and in fact get aromatized into estrogen when you are showing these symptoms of poor health, accumulation of belly fat, and so forth.
Yeah, if you don't have your training in place and your diet and your lifestyle, I mean, you mentioned a little bit of your sleep and how important that is, and it's really I think of that as your circadian lifestyle, um, and if that's not really dialed in, yes, testosterone replacement therapy or HRT can be of benefit, but you're really wasting it. I mean, really, what we should be doing is getting your lifestyle factors in check first. Um, really looking at your daily habits, what you're eating, um, how you're sleeping, how you're managing your light environment. That's something that is often overlooked. And, diet and exercise is a cornerstone, but also let's look at your are you getting morning light? Are you sleeping well through the night? Some people, due to their job, um, might not be. They might have to be doing shift work or whatnot. Um, so again, it's hard, to for me to say, well, just get your sleep. There's some people where that's very tough for many different reasons. But yes, we try to coach people. We can't say it enough. Diet, your training, you're getting your zone two cardio in, getting to bed, getting off the screens,
Mhm.
getting all of that dialed in first. Um, a lot of times we do have people that come to us with those dialed in, but a lot of times we have people that need to be coached on that, and it's it's definitely it's definitely nice to see how they track in their blood work, giving them objective data to show their progress. And a lot of times that's what keeps people on track, right? Seeing that the results on paper um, is another way for some people, particularly if they're analytical minded, to say, okay, let's go down into this rabbit hole even further. Getting the blue light blocking glasses, maybe getting into the photobiomodulation, and really going down the rabbit hole of what it is, that we know from longevity, from following people like you, for sure.
The photobiomodulation is the use of red light therapy to enhance cellular repair and even testosterone production. And I understand there's some pretty good research validating that those red lights really work for a lot of different health conditions and optimization.
Yeah, it's really, the health of the mitochondria in the cells are really, that whole rabbit hole is very intriguing to me. Um, these little organelles in our cells that make energy and do a lot of work for us. They they seem to be like little semiconductors that are stimulated by certain wavelengths of light. And if you think about it, your skin is kind of like a solar panel. The sun is very important. That's not a surprise. We've you know are definitely dependent on the sun. And so, the certain wavelength of light from, the red lights do seem to stimulate, from what I've read, the mitochondria and just help them output, and work better. So it's something that's really interesting to me, really, really kind of fascinating.
Is there occasions where someone can have what might be considered to be poor numbers, but claim to feel pretty good? And then vice versa, is it possible to have pretty decent looking numbers and then complain of a bunch of symptoms?
Um, if it depends on the metric. So if you're looking at overall ApoB containing particles, that's something that a patient really might not present any feeling at all until it's too late. In fact, the most common way heart disease presents itself is unfortunately heart attack and death.
Tell us
So
what ApoB is as well on the blood report.
yeah, so ApoB is apolipoprotein B. It's a protein that is found, wraps around these particles that transport, things that are not miscible in water. So cholesterol is a, waxy, lipid. Doesn't, just like anyone knows that oil and water, they don't mix. It's not miscible in water. So it's famously known for transporting cholesterol, but not commonly. Well, it's overlooked that you also have vitamins A, D, E, and K that are also not miscible in water. CoQ10 as well, um, and triglycerides. So these ApoB containing particles are VLDL, IDL, LDL. Um, they're lipoproteins. You can think of them as little ships or boats, cargo carrying vessel, particles, and that cargo is cholesterol and these other, vitamins that I spoke about. So the ApoB containing particle is an interesting one, and I know you've interviewed a lot of people about this. Um, you know, whether this is a friend or foe, well, I think I'm not going to put my personal opinion in here, but um, it's definitely a metric that is important, specifically if we have a person that is metabolically dysfunctional, that just drives up their risk for cardiovascular events. So that's something that we want to measure, and it's a better measurement than your standard low density your LDL cholesterol. So there's a lot of different metrics. You have LDL-C, which is the cholesterol within those particles. You have your LDL-P, that's the particle number. ApoB includes your LDL particles as well as the remnants. Those are your VLDL, IDL, chylomicrons if you're you know if you're really into it. Um, and so that's something that is a little bit more intricate in how you look at that. And like I said, um, heart disease doesn't present itself very well. Sometimes it's too late by the time it presents. And so,
Especially if you're running marathons and being viewed as a picture of health and fitness, looking good on the outside. And
yeah,
I have so many examples of my peers that were extreme endurance athletes that came up with serious heart problems and even sudden death from heart attack due to, I mean, you can say due to whatever. A lot of times you hear the line from, it's sort of like a common to blame, one's genetics and one's, bad luck. But there's also some overwhelming evidence now, mounting, that extreme endurance exercise is really bad on the heart and can cause overstress, scarring, inflammation, atrial fibrillation, all driven by the extreme exercise protocol that just overworks the cardiovascular system.
Yeah, just the vast amount of oxidative stress. There's definitely a U-shaped curve there. And I don't want people to think that cardiovascular exercise is bad, but yeah, you can definitely push it too far.
It's very, very easy. In fact, the great TED talk from Dr. James O'Keefe, one of the leaders in this field, he contends, and there's a lot of research to support this, that like 2.5 hours a week of comfortably paced aerobic exercise is like the optimal level for cardiovascular health and disease protection. And of course, when we're going for cardiovascular fitness, like to improve our time in the half marathon or whatever, we're going to vastly exceed that. And when you describe a U-shaped curve, it's anything past 2.5 hours of jogging or jog walking, depending on your fitness. That's when you're tiptoeing away from optimal health benefits in pursuit of fitness, and then at increased risk of disease, even when you come to the most extreme examples.
In fact, a lot of patients are kind of surprised just on how little the zone two cardio really is to to get the benefit out of it. It's really not hours and hours like you said. It's very manageable for most people to really get a good amount of benefit from, just a great amount of benefit from. And the good news is there, it's easy for people to squeeze into their busy lifestyles. Um, but just kind of going back to your question. So yeah, that's one metric. But other metrics, even in the hormones, yeah, it's very possible for someone to still feel good and have quote unquote suboptimal levels. It's that's why you have to go. You can't really go by numbers all the time. You have to go by the patient themselves. And so there is a large genetic component to all of this, that unfortunately really hasn't been fully elucidated. And so,
Mm.
um, you know, yeah, and then there's the opposite to that too, Brad, where maybe someone has on paper, you know, some metrics that are look good, but they still feel like crap. So, you know, let's try to dig deeper and see
Mm.
what we can find out, and maybe that they're genetically programmed to be at a kind of a higher, you know, amount of whatever it is. So it's kind of hard to say, and so that's why we look at a little bit of a deeper list of biomarkers, and so we can hopefully triangulate that, you know, because it's not easy to just look at one single metric. You have to kind of piece things together, and it's it's something you also have to be very mindful of the patient and what they're experiencing.
So you use that term hormone replacement therapy, and I wonder if you can compare and contrast between the layperson's perspective of the doped up athlete who is, you could call it hormone abusive therapy, because generally when we see these crazy bodybuilders and the giant football players who are bigger at each position these days, and the viewer at home's going, yeah, those guys are all doped up, and boy, they're gonna drop dead of a heart attack for sure, because it's so bad for you. And that was this media portrayal that's been programmed into our brains. I remember Chris Bell's wonderful documentary, Bigger, Stronger, Faster, where it was challenged, this idea that you're trading a gold medal for a heart attack. And in fact, what you're trading is, in many cases, just performance gains, especially when it comes to like Tour de France athletes. I contend that the event itself is so grueling and so compromising to your general baseline health and even longevity that it might be better to perform something crazy like that completely doped up, because it's going to be less stress on the organism. But anyway, that's a little side note. But yeah, maybe we could compare and contrast when you're going for replacement and trying to get someone feeling good versus overdoing it to get on stage for the bodybuilding show.
Yeah. So as the name implies, you're replacing a hormone, um, and when you are managing that, you want to make sure you don't go too much, and you don't go too little. You want to go within the normal physiologic boundaries.
Mm,
As soon as you go over that, um, you start to come across problems. You know, testosterone um, and a lot of people, and we learned this. We learned a lot from the bodybuilders. So I don't want to, you know what I mean? It's
yeah, for
a lot
real.
of this stuff is not. I don't want to sound like I'm judging anyone either. But when they go too high and they push the limits, there are other kind of things that happen. You mentioned aromatase. Something that's this enzyme that kind of converts testosterone into estrogen. Um, you know, when we put someone on exogenous testosterone, if they're in normal limits, they shouldn't need aromatase inhibitors. They shouldn't really need to have their estrogen, you know, controlled exogenously. It should be, it should be within the normal physiologic processes of the body where that's all kind of managed and it's kind of falls into line nicely. Really, where we come into problems is when we're really pushing the limits, and
Mm,
so things don't kind of fall into a silo. Things convert. There's a lot of different catalysts in the body that kind of change compounds into other compounds that might not be so beneficial for us if we're going into superland. So um, when we talk about just replacing, what we're doing is we're looking for a dose that will be, it'll look like a normal physiological level, right? In a man, um, that's, not going too high, right? That for the testes don't produce, testosterone, um, where they're in, the 2000 range for the most part, where you have a free testosterone of just crazy high levels. And so obviously if you're, using exogenous testosterone, you can go that high. You can just increase and push more dose. And so we tend to see the bad effects on the cardiovascular system, on with skin and acne and all that stuff. That's when we tend to see problems, gynecomastia, maybe issues with too much iron being produced, stimulated and produced, and so blood getting too viscous. Um, but when someone is in those normal ranges, they really shouldn't have those problems. And like I said, it's a it's a natural kind of naturally occurring molecule. So the body knows how to deal with that, and as long as there's not too much. So that's how we like to approach things. Just keeping people into that sweet spot of you know not too low but not too high, and that's why part of the process when coming on board as a patient is you have to get your labs done. You have to get checked, after starting a protocol, and you have to be monitored because there's always potential for things to happen down the line where we want to make sure we're just not doing any harm, right? So um, that's really where we stand, and so yeah. Long story short is there's definitely a sweet spot, and we do not kind of go into the super physiologic territory.
right. And with my blood values here at age 57, I'm still in the good to great category. I'd like to be great all the time, and I'm doing my best with all the lifestyle factors. But I was declared not a candidate um, to bring in replacement hormones yet. Because I don't want to go super physiologic. But I want to make sure the listener understands, like the extreme athletes that play around with this stuff, they have all these health concerns that start to pile up, but they're also setting records. So the stuff really works. It's just the crazy trade-off that almost no one is interested in considering. So I think when we're walking around asking the question of is this a good idea for humanity to see all these males going to the anti-aging clinics and getting dosed? We're not looking at people that are going super physiologic by and large.
Right. And the problem that we see with a lot of places just giving one-off dosages, like we call it cookie cutter protocols, that could be very high based on, an individual's,
Right. You don't
based
know
on an
who you're
individual.
dealing with. You just got some guy walked in with cash and yeah, it's
Yeah, and
not,
I
yeah.
don't want to, I don't want to judge, but we always take into what's, the sex hormone binding globulin.
Mhm.
And if you are, just kind of naturally low on SHBG and you give someone 200 milligrams of testosterone, that's going to create a lot of free testosterone, right? So that's where you can potentially come into problems. So just kind of giving everyone a single dose, we see that a lot, and I don't really understand why we see it a lot. I don't know if it's just I, I can't call it incompetence because it must be just negligence or something. But unfortunately, it's out there a lot. When we don't take that approach, we have to really dial in the dose to the individual, and so it's really based on a lot of factors, and that's why we test fairly deeply, just to make sure we're going to get everything right, and then we have to just tweak as we go, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a crazy world out there from some of the stories I've heard.
Well, I guess that would fall in the same category. Some guy walking in and saying, "Hey, I want to feel better," and the doctor says, "Here's some testosterone that's guaranteed to make you feel better." It kind of falls in the same category as dispensing the pain medication for the arthritis or the joint pain or whatever. You're going to get an immediate relief of symptoms, and that's what society has been programmed to crave. And the drug companies and all the powers that be are all marching in this direction of trying to make us feel as comfortable and and pacified as possible. And that's why it's so important to look beyond that. And that's what's so great about an operation like Marek Health, where you can go in as an individual, like you said at the outset of the show, and get treated with that extreme respect for your own personal particulars and how they change each passing month and each passing year. So it yeah, I don't want this to sound like a commercial, but it's kind of a commercial because I'm so, personally enamored with my experience so far. AmericHealth.com/Brad Kearns. It shows you the exact protocol that I'm following as far as the blood tests, and then the opportunity to consult with experts. So you're doing great stuff. It was good to learn more about it. And I think I don't know, what do you think we also need to cover to give the listener kind of the perspective about what's available on cutting edge medicine these days?
Well, it really kind of all starts with your blood work. It starts with really looking under the hood and seeing how um, you know your levels are as an individual. And I like you said in the beginning, I think a lot of people are going and getting their annual physicals, but that might not be enough, depending on kind of who's looking at um, or kind of who's ordering stuff. And so um, from our list of just items that we can order, we look very deeply, and that's kind of where it's a nice place to go and really get a good understanding of your health, because we look deeply, we look at the important markers. There's really not a lot of fluff. It's really kind of the good stuff. And so a lot goes into the human body, and I think that's really what where we start, and that's why we start just at the labs, taking in your personal goals, and just seeing where you are, if that's reflected in your blood work, and then kind of going from there.
Love it. James Petercsak, a great overview. Keep doing that great work. You know where to find
Thank you, Brad.
Marek Health people by now. And I think I'm going to maybe deliver some more content where I talk in detail about my protocol and my recommendations, because I think the takeaway point is you absolutely do not want to mess around with this yourself in a layperson strategy. And I know a lot about supplementation. I've taken a ton of stuff. I've worked for supplement companies. I read, I live and breathe this stuff, but it's so far out of my league to try to personally optimize the different values and how they interrelate. And I like how you guys are in that continuing education mode. You also have amassing a giant patient database so we can see how things are going with real people leading real lives.
And I also just want to point out, you're obviously extremely knowledgeable, but uh, as a lot of coaches have told me, you're your own worst coach. Even if you do know a lot about this stuff, it's always nice just to get another set of eyes, because sometimes you can just kind of maybe not overlook things, but it's just always nice to just get someone else kind of looking at stuff and just to kind of bounce things off of. I do it, I have other people that I kind of, consult with for sure. And we all do, even
Mhm.
our head of patient care, he recently told me that he hired a coach because, like I mentioned, you're not, you're your own worst coach. I'll just leave it at that sometimes.
Love it. And that it goes for everything.
Hmm.
Your business, your relationships, whatever, that's why we have experts doing great work. And I appreciate you taking the time to share all that. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go check out MarekHealth.com/Brad Kearns, and you will get started in a nice, graceful manner toward optimization. Why be normal when you can be optimal?
Thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate being on here.
Dum 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 dum.